but there's sparks flying. I thought, what the hell is this? And then I did it and I thought, we better get a lot of water on here. I started to see some orange. Now, what does orange depict when you're drilling somebody's tooth? What do you think? Bit of heat? Woo! So you can just imagine that poor pulp underneath is being boiled. Absolutely boiled. So you might as well... So this is a huge problem. So the zircon did a lot of damage to the porcelain fused zirconia market, and they did a lot of damage as far as lava is concerned too, because everybody thought if I put a porcelain fused zirconia crown in and all the veneering ceramic keeps on coming off, I'm not going to have many patients who are going to be very happy. A big, big, big problem. It got better. How do you think what are the two major things that happened with porcelain fused zirconia crowns that improved so much? Number one was very much the copings all of a sudden were redesigned and supported the marginal ridges. So instead of having a coping that looked like a top hat, you actually had a top hat and you had some extensions going towards the marginal ridges to support the ceramic. That made a huge difference. So the designs of the copings were very different than they were with metal. And then specific porcelains were designed to actually adhere beautifully and bond nicely to the zirconia. So this is a much, much better material now. Hell of a lot better. I mean, it's strong. I mean, the first time, did you ever see the demonstration when the lecturer throws the coping on the floor and challenges somebody from the audience to come down and jump on the thing? I saw that. I thought, oh my God, what's he doing? And he's jumping on this thing, it's not breaking. I thought, wow, that's pretty impressive. So it's very strong. It's extremely strong. The copings won't break. Once you put one of those babies on again, the day of sort of reckoning comes when you're going to take it off. That's necessary. Maybe you should put them all on with temp bond. Or maybe a little lever on the side so you can just lift it off occasionally and just redo it, because maybe that will be simpler. Because taking those things off is a nightmare. Anyway, it's getting better. The problem is, what about colour? What about the value of a porcelain fused zirconia crown? Do you use them for anteriors? If you've got a bucket load of room, maybe. But generally speaking, where are they great for? 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe. But I wouldn't go around sticking them on anteriors. If you've got a bunch of them, 4 of them, and you don't mind looking like you're out of California, with sort of the toilet bowl white sort of, the Pacific, Ocean, Nevada border, white to white sort of smile, that's fine. But if you're really after sort of something which is really aesthetic, I sort of think you should be steering away from here. I was saying yesterday, I always laugh when I go to the States because, if you're on your visa, Bob was listening to this yesterday, on your visa application, you know that gingival embrasures are banned in the USA. That if you can actually get a toothpick between your teeth in the US, they won't let you in. Everything has got to be closed up. It's remarkable. I always laugh when I go there. Every time I sort of see somebody in the US, I want to get a high-speed diamond and I want to just plane everything back and get some intraproximal bursts and strip in between because I want to get a TP through the gingival margins. It's just remarkable. I watch those extreme makeover programs and they have the big reveal and say, Bill Dorfman today is going to do such and such, and they show this patient. And it's just like one big toilet bowl of white going from one end to the other. I think they've only got one shade of ceramic in the US. I think it's 1M1. I think it's sort of something which I find a little bit disturbing. Not so that the colour doesn't bother me, just the fact is the interproximal shape is just, to me, is all wrong. I was taught to make things so we can get brushes and TPs and all that things in between them. Anyway, as far as this material is concerned, though, I don't think the game is over as far as zirconia copings and really nice soft ceramics over the top. I think we've still got some work to do on that one. Now, if you see, look at this beautiful bridge. Now, isn't that gorgeous? What do you think about that? I mean, look at the anatomy, look at the staining. That's a piece of crap. If somebody gives you that, don't cement it. Now, you probably wonder why. Now, this is great. This is something we did a while ago, but this is garbage. Now, it might look beautiful, but this is drama. This is drama, because the moment you start putting fissure patterns in something like that, I promise you're going to get a different thickness of layering ceramic. What you should be getting back with your porcelain fused zirconia, you want rolling hills, you don't want Swiss Alps. The moment you start seeing huge mountains and rivers down the bottom, there's drama, okay, because you get areas where that ceramic is going to debond. So don't let anybody fool you. This looks beautiful, but this is all just a mirage. This is dangerous stuff. The one thing you can see on this picture, which I like, is you see the connectors. You need thick connectors if you're going to do a bridge. But that is just rubbish. That is dangerous stuff. So please don't let anybody fool you that that's the gold standard, because it's not. It'll break. And that's a problem. Now, just coming back here, this shows you a little bit about between a stained restoration and a veneered restoration. This is in cross-section, so if we get a crown and we cut them in half, you'll see the difference here. Now, you might have zirconia oxide, you see underneath there, 900 MPa or greater than. That's brilliant. But the veneering ceramic over the top, which is a lucite, is quite weak. The moment you get joins anywhere, there's trouble. All right? When I say trouble, I'm not saying it's going to break off, but the likelihood is that it could break off. Whereas on the left-hand side, if it's one chunk, generally speaking, and you bond it quite nicely, no sharp internal line angles and the occlusion's right, that's going to last pretty well. Now, here's our dangerous friend. And this is one which I'm really concerned about, and I've been looking and looking and looking at this, and I haven't been convinced from day one when this material came out, and it just somehow it stuck in my craw that this wasn't quite right. About a month ago, we were doing some more research, and I'm going to show you some photos which I haven't actually released. I just wrote an article about this about a month ago, and I didn't put the pictures in because I was like a little bit concerned about this. I'll show you something which I think is quite interesting. Fully milled zirconia is one big chunk again. This is one big chunk of monolithic zirconia now, and that's got no veneering stuff over the top. Now in Germany they call this the jackboot crown because it's hard and it's tough. Okay, it's not going to break. When you prepare the tooth, it should be prepared like a full gold crown. The moment you start preparing that like a PFM, the aesthetics are going to nosedive completely, because as it gets thicker, this probably sounds counterintuitive, but if you're going to use a fully milled zirconia crown, you actually want it to be thinner so the light will shine through. So it looks somewhat real. So if you get a PFM that's failed and you stick one of these on, and the walls are 1.5 millimetres thick, you will not get any light go through there whatsoever. It will look very, very unaesthetic. So sometimes some of our dentists ring us and sort of say, David, why does this one look worse than the other one? And generally speaking, it's not the zirconia, it's the thickness of the zirconia that's really being affected. Ideal for bruxers, sure it is. But imagine if you're a bruxer and you're putting this an abrasive material and a very strong material against dentine. You're going to do a lot of damage. And coming back to what I was saying before, you don't want to put hard and abrasive versus soft. Difficult to remove and adjust, we talked about that already. Now, there's some studies being done, and this, again, I'm sort of concerned about this, the amount of abrasion. But let me show you a few things. Here is a scanned, this is something we did a while ago. This is a model that's been scanned. So we're using, this is a 3-shape scanner. This is a lab scanner. Now, we've actually just signed a deal, actually we finalised it today, with 3-shape intraoral scanners, which is another new generation scanner, which is something I can talk to you about another day. But this is what you would see actually in the lab. And what actually happens in here with the 3-shape software, we design a crown. Now, every time you grab one of these little guys there, you can actually change the anatomy. It's great. It's really interesting. I give sort of technicians this sort of Pepsi sort of versus Coke test, and I say, let's see what occlusal anatomy. So the default is that the program will look at the teeth next door, build something which is reasonably close, but then it's up to the technician to design what's on the occlusal surface. Now, the technicians, some people get it right, some people get it wrong. It's a little bit more challenging than it looks. Now, what actually happens is you can just see our 3-shape scanner on the left there. Then we're getting ready to mill the restoration. So this is a puck. Look, when I say it's a puck, it's a disc of zirconia. And that goes into a machine, into a milling machine. So it's designed first, and then we sell. And you can sort of see this is actually getting to the end of its days because there's no room left for any more zirconia. So watch this milling machine, and just have a little look at this. And this is how it works. It's picking up the burr first. It'd be good if you could do all our dentistry like this, wouldn't it? You put the patient in your hand. Just press the button and you can go and have a coffee. So this is called a dry mill, and it's being evacuated the whole time. It's got like a vacuum cleaner inside to capture all the bits and pieces, but it's really deadly accurate. And one of the only problem with the machine is that those burrs break. And as you get finer and finer burrs, these burrs do tend to break. And that's cutting through zirconia. So it's obviously very, very strong, very, very fast. Now you see on the right-hand side, we've got a selection of burrs. So if it needs a different burr, it'll pick it up and it will move back and pick up one of the burrs automatically. So we can actually leave this running overnight and we can make 25 crowns basically overnight using this machine. So that's now let me go on to the next one. And this is a close-up now. You can sort of see a really good idea of just how accurate this machine is. So it'll turn it over, it'll cut the extrusion side, then it'll cut the walls, and it's rotating on about a 7-axis. It's got a 7-axis mill. So these take about 25 minutes to do for each crown. Okay, so what actually happens is after the crown is milled, there is the finished restoration in terms of shape. Now, when you look at this tooth, it looks like a tooth for Shrek. You probably say, why? Because this is actually 23% bigger than it should be. Okay, so what this actually has to happen now, this is just a raw product. So the zirconia has been milled, and you can see a couple of things which are quite interesting. First of all, you can see a little lip around the edge. You actually have to design the zirconia that you know it's going to be shrinking anywhere between 22 and 24%. Now, each time you get a puck, the actual manufacturer will tell you how much it's going to shrink. So you have to allow for that shrinkage, so that when you design it in the CAD CAM, you actually have to allow for shrinkage. Now, this is where it starts to get a little bit disturbing. This was a connector and this has been cut off, but look what you sort of start to see. The moment we start to look under this, under sort of high magnification, we can start to see where the mill has been, and you can start to see burr marks. Now, as you get finer burrs, these actually get smaller and smaller and harder to see, but they're actually still there. So the more magnification, you can see a number of serrations. So when you think about it, if any of you have used the old flat Fisher burrs, and some of us older dentists here when we're designing cavities, sort of back in dental school, we used to get all those sharp angles. And somebody would say, to get a flat Fisher burr and make this da-da-da-da. Now, you sort of think about that, you're pushing against that. If you look under magnification, you'll see exactly the same thing. You'll see burr marks. Even with end-cutting burrs, under a microscope, under a really powerful light microscope, you'll see almost like a hoovering, a polishing effect. And that's really quite disturbing as well. But this is macroscopic. Now, what do we do with that? We use a finer burr, we can get it down a little bit smaller, but what actually happens to this then? Which part's going to last longer? Which one there? The acrylic nails or the crown? I think this is a great photo because the technician we were using, I thought to myself, that's interesting. I wonder if she actually is polishing the zirconia or she polishes her fingernail, which one's actually going to last longer? No question about that. I guess there won't be any sparks flying if we take a fingernail off. But the interesting part is here that if all of a sudden we get a technician who's got to start polishing out all of those little serrations, then all of a sudden it takes away, it circumvents the whole reason that we're using a milling machine. And the only reason we're using a milling machine is to make this process faster. Don't think it's better. It's just faster. That's the only reason, in my opinion, why milling machines exist, because we can make exquisite fitting restorations without having to use a machine. So the moment you bring a human element back in here and you start polishing it, then all of a sudden the labour hours go up and it becomes more expensive. Now, the problem when she does something like this is how do you get a uniform reduction? That's actually become harder. So what all the laboratories are doing now is they're filling in those spaces, those serrations, with stain and with glaze. So when you get it back, you'll think, wow, this looks pretty smooth. But you've actually got, under a microscope, you've got a whole pile of serrations which have been filled in by a glaze. Now, to me, that's disturbed me, because if you put that on somebody who's 65 years of age, their enamel is gone and they've got dentine, and you're putting a serrated surface of 1200 MPa against dentine, what's going to happen? Now, that's a bit scary. I think that's a bit scary, but people haven't really examined this because there's been very little research done on this material as yet. Nobody's gotten in there and said, well, hang on a minute, let's have a really close look at this material. So all I'm sort of saying is if you want to put one of these babies against another one of those, that's fine. But put this against exposed dentine, or something which is weak, in my opinion, or an MOD amalgam, and you'll be doing another crown on the lower tooth in quick time. It's probably a good way to build your practice if you're that way inclined. Okay, so Shrek's tooth. It looks like that. It's really big. It's interesting. You look up here, this is laser denta, this is a zirconia, and here it says a shrinkage factor 1.2375. So that tooth is actually going to shrink 23.75%. Now, the thing I'm amazed about it is there going to be a uniform shrinkage? And this is something that just, when you think about it, we're making something to fit over that, to fit exquisitely over that, but we're making it too big, and you've got to hope that that shrinkage is uniform, so it comes down and actually fits perfectly against the margins. And remarkably, it does. But you have to be aware, cognizant, I said, that's how they look. And then it goes into a sintering oven. Now, these little zirconia particles sort of down in here, and little beads, and we put this down in there, and we sinter it. And that sintering process takes quite a few hours. And that what actually sort of see is they constrict. And all of a sudden it goes from Shrek's teeth. What was Shrek's wife's name? Fiona? Goes back to her, sort of something that you could fit in there. So this is quite a convoluted sort of process. And then what we do, the latest thing is we start to stain them. There's lots of different stains that we're using. There's probably 10 different types of stain that we can use. And we've got one which is reasonably good. Are they beautiful crowns? I don't think so. Are they reasonable? Yeah, they're reasonable. Are they cost effective? Yes. But do they have problems? Absolutely. Aesthetics, as far as I'm concerned, at best, you would sort of say would be reasonable. So don't get carried away with these. I mean, we're selling these things, but again, I'm putting sort of all sorts of disclaimers and saying be very careful using a material like this. I'm still not convinced. I'd like to see some evidence-based stuff and 5-year studies. Maybe it's something you guys could do up here. I think it would be fascinating if somebody could do a study on fully milled zirconia. But intuitively, I feel like sticking something which is so hard and so abrasive and so unforgiving is really not where we should be going. PFM, we're sort of getting near the end of this. With porcelain fused to metal, oldie but a goodie. Obviously, I don't need to tell you too much about these. The veneering ceramics are getting better and better as time going by. Obviously, these things rarely really debond. Great restoration. A couple of things. Some of the dental schools, we've still got people running around sort of saying you've got to put yellow gold underneath porcelain because of the colours and things like that. Well, I think that's a bit of a misnomer. I think that sort of disappeared quite some time ago with all ceramic margins. I really think that's not something that's really that sort of significant any longer. And the cost of gold at the moment is so high that unless you've got a patient who can afford a couple of $100 worth of gold every time. I mean, I use semi-precious metal for all my PFMs in Sydney. And I always use nickel or beryllium free. That's, to me, is the best thing. You've got to realise the aesthetics of a PFM is going to deteriorate over time. No question about that. Because the glaze comes off, the outer ceramic comes off, the opaque comes through. I mean, this is PFM. These still look darn good as far as I'm concerned. All the PFMs we make for our practice, we have 360-degree ceramic margins. So sometimes I'll do a very, very fine knife edge if I haven't got enough tooth structure. lower anteriors, for instance, I won't do a 360-degree margin. I'll put a fine metal margin on the lower anteriors because I'm trying to keep the buccolingual diameter as wide as I possibly can. But I still think we can get some really, really lovely results with PFM. I still use this sort of quite a bit, and I still think it's going to be the gold standard for sort of quite some time. There's a friend of mine, I put these crowns in, and do you think this is a failure? These were 20 years old. I think, and when he came to me, he had partial and partial. He lost his 6s and 7s on top and bottom, had partial and partial, causing all sorts of dramas. And I said, I think you can actually survive with a 20-tooth occlusion if we restore these properly. I put crowns on and they lasted 20 years. So this is a typical example. I mean, I'll show you stuff which is far from perfect, but this is a case I'm actually quite proud of. The soft tissue here has gone, of course, and he's gone through the enamel, actually they even punctured the metal. But this is a spectacular result. I sort of think this is something I'm pretty proud of. We've redone them sort of since then. This is the type of sort of thing I don't tend to do sort of the margin as wide as this, but generally speaking, this is the type of restoration that I'll do a lot of in my practice. Patients don't want to sort of see any metal, and if I've got plenty of room to work with, I can get a really beautiful looking crown with a 360-degree ceramic margin. Just in summary, as far as the strength is concerned, here, if you've got those three things, what would I want in my tooth if it was a lower 6? I would probably go for the gold crown, number 1. This guy 2, and this guy would be 22nd. I'd probably stick away from this guy. I'm not I'm too confident about that one. So, in summary, this is sort of where I think we're at the moment, and I look at things very much assuming ideal preparation and case selection, and if we're trying to consider the antagonist. So I'm just not talking about just the tooth itself, because anybody can put a restoration in that's going to last, but you want to think about what it's going to bite against. I think what's important here is, I still think PFM is great. These ones, highly predictable in terms of Ceramarch and Lava Ultimate. I'm pretty happy about that because I think these crowns will last. They may stain, but I know they're not going to do any damage against the antagonist. These other ones are excellent as well. Don't get me wrong, these are all good restorations. But when I say somewhat predictable, I'm concerned about, well, you heard me talk about this one, and some of these other ones, again, very much, I would say that the problem with Emax monolithic and Emax veneered, still it's very technique and preparation sensitive. So good preparation, and they'll last a hell of a long time. Good cementation technique, they'll last a hell of a long time. And the FMZIR, that'll be there for 100 years. I don't know if any other tooth will be left, but they'll dig you up in 3,000 years and say, gee, those guys were clever. They made these great crowns that lasted so long. So that's as far as longevity is concerned. And as far as aesthetics are concerned, again, I love Empress aesthetic. That's a beautiful material, but as we said, it's not that strong. The veneered Emaxes, beautiful. Really, really gorgeous looking crowns. PFMs can be great. Pacera Lumina, sometimes, again, aluminium oxide by nature is quite opaque. It's got other oxides in there which actually also make it sort of quite opaque. And then the less predictable aesthetics, the FMZIR is very opaque. The porcelain fused zirconia. These guys can be, as I said, as far as aesthetics are concerned, Lava Ultimate and Ceramarch are great. But if you put them up against some beautiful Empress aesthetic, you're playing a different sport. This is a composite, a reinforced composite. That's a ceramic, a glazed ceramic with light properties which are just beautiful. So that is probably about the best restoration as far as aesthetics are concerned, given everything that's right. Anyway, look, I hope that I've sort of opened your eyes up to sort of some of these materials. If you want to sort of have a look sort of online, we've got this presentation online. And if anybody wants to sort of get in touch with me, ask me about any of these sort of materials, sort of I'm really happy. But I just, again, want you to look at all these and try and understand them carefully and know what you're going. I think there's going to be a lot of changes still in the next 3 or 4 years. We haven't seen the end of this yet. I still believe, and I might be wrong, but I still believe we're heading towards a softer generation rather than the harder generation. And I'm certainly pushing my patients more towards that sort of softer stuff. So if you want to email me, you can get me at either of those two things. Any questions? Is there anything that you'd like to sort of throw at me? No. Yeah. They don't, but you're still bonding the matrix. So the main part is still the resin. You're still bonding the resin to the two. It's only filler particles, but you can't actually get any bond as far as the zirconia. The lava, the 3M are claiming with the lithium disilicate reinforcement that they can bond to it, but the zirconia ones, the zirconia part of the ceramage is less. The filler content is less than the silicate, the lithium disilicate content in the other one. So you would be silent, just basically silanating, and that's where they expect you to do it. And the same with the lava ultimately. There's bonding stuff for zirconia now. Yeah, but I don't think that the sort of amount of zirconia there will be that significant that would be in terms of. I still think the resin matrix. I think it's by weight and not by volume, because it's a big difference between the two. The zirconia is actually quite heavy and the resin's light. But if you talk about by weight, then you're really sort of more to the stuff. So I think it's more by weight than anything. So, anybody else? John? No, so the Emax. Emax is lithium disilicate. Yeah. Yeah. Veneer. Yeah. Yeah. The shrinkage? Yeah. 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 John, the interesting part is that if you sort of say that this was a sort of a standard preparation, I know that's not a standard preparation, the whole idea with a coping, with a PFM, again, to be a thimble like that, when we're going with the veneering ceramic over porcelain, if you so the 5s there, the 7s there, we'll bring this up similarly to a top hat, but we'll extend towards the proximal boxes or the marginal ridges. You'll extend the zirconia coping so it goes up like this, it mushrooms up like that, and we bring it as close to the marginal ridge as we possibly can. So the idea is that whatever veneering ceramic, so if that were just a normal thimble, here that veneering ceramic or PFM would be quite thick, whereas if you extend this out significantly, and we design this, we can mill those to extend this out quite a bit. So this is done on a 3-shape scanner with the software. We actually extend it out so that the whole idea is we don't want any unsupported veneering ceramic on porcelain fused zirconia. That's where the big drama occurred with zircon, and the fact that the material that was actually used to veneer the zirconia back then was the same one we were using for PFM. But now they're designed specifically. So 2 changes: the change of design of coping, the support of the ridges, the marginal ridges, and again the actual ceramic is ideal now. So if you want to see a picture, I can get you some pictures of showing you a zirconia, porcelain fused zirconia coping, and it looks very different to that of the PFM. One thing I didn't sort of say, there is a material. As far as there's Emax Zircos as well, which I didn't mention, which again is the same one. Emax trying to use a zirconia coping as well, so that's another material. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope I open your eyes a little bit to these materials. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that was a very enlightening lecture. Yesterday I heard David speak about green dentistry. He was talking about conserving tooth enamel. Today a very similar approach, conservative dentistry approach, which is quite interesting, coming from a man who makes a living selling components and laboratory work. So once again, David, thanks very much for that honesty.